Yo, this video is going to be an overview and explanation of all the different FX containers in Bitwig. It's gonna be quite long because Bitwig has a lot to offer here. So let's just start with the most basic one, which is the chain. It just basically allows you to get like compressors, EQs, whatever, and bundle them all up and save them as presets, as well as having a control for wet gain and a mix here. And with 5.2 there's a new interesting feature, which is the loudness matching here. So if this chain somehow affects the volume, you can set Bitwig up to automatically compensate for it. So you can click this L and it's going to learn how this chain affects the loudness, and then it's going to automatically compensate for it. This takes quite a long time. I think it says 25 seconds in the manual. So now it's done, and as you can see, because we remove some frequencies and compress it a bit, it adds 2.5 dB of gain here. So that's a very useful feature if you want to kind of loudness match, turn this on, off, compare different effects. The second one I want to talk about is the FX layer. Now, this basically is just different layers of FX. So you can, for example, have like a filter here, which only has the lows. You can solo these, mute these. And then maybe here I want to have like a pitch shifter for whatever reason. If you go into the inspector here, you can see that these are basically treated like normal tracks. So you've got stereo panning here, you've got a larger fader, you can solo them, you can mute them, you can send them to send, and you can also, if you get like an audio receiver, target just these as a sidechain input. Go into here and you can see these are basically like you've made two tracks. You can get the dry one, you can get the pitch shifter one. So this is very neat. This can save a lot of space and help you layer effects. Then the next one is the FX selector. Now this, instead of layering FX, I'm gonna make like, oh, I'm in the new beta by the way right now, so that's why that just crashed. That's not normal. I just mostly use the beta right now. So I'm gonna make two here. I'm gonna pitch shift one up an octave, pitch one, shift one down an octave, and then you've got these different modes of selecting them here. So you can go between them. If you go into the inspector, you can fade in and fade out different tracks when you switch between them. Now, one thing that might be interesting for this is that if I put a reverb in here and maybe just get a single thing here and then automate this to switch after this node, you can see that even though we switch tracks here, this still rings out. So what these switches here are automating is the input into the chain. If there are any kind of time-based effects like reverbs, delays, and we switch chain, they're still going to ring out. You can hear this here nicely. Some other features of this, you can get different MIDI sources in here, and you've got all these modes. Like this is manual. Round robin is a node-based mode where basically every node there's going to be selected a new layer. Free robin, you skips voices, free voice, random nodes. So these are all node-based basically. And this first one is just the automation here. You can see this is index, and then you've got the stepped automation for however many layers you've got. So yeah, then the next one is getting a bit more into the splitting your signal terrain. So you've got the left-right split. This, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. It splits the signal into left channel, right channel, and you can process them individually. So if you solo them, you can hear each one. You can turn them up or down by 24 dB, and you can, for example, I'm just gonna use the pitch shifter because it's easy to hear. Pitch shift only the right up. Sorry. One thing that might be interesting is that you can just select this here, hold control, drag this in here, and you get one in both that has got the exact same settings. So you can just move stuff over here like this. If there's already something in here, it's going to get added to the end of it. One interesting trick you can, for example, do with this is you get a dynamics, and you can use this to balance out your stereo a bit. So if your stereo image is like very offset, where you're off kilter to one side, you can compress these both, and because the compressor is gonna react more on the louder side, it's going to kind of equalize this a bit. So you can see here, these are a similar volume, where here it's more off balance. So this can be a nice trick for like ambiences or something you want to have be more balanced in the stereo image. Now the next one is the mid-side split, kind of a similar thing, but instead of right and left, it gives you sum and difference. So the sum is the mid. Some people also call it the mono signal. This is gonna be what stays when you fold your signal to mono. And the side is just the stuff that's different between both channels. So this can be very useful, for example, for mid-side EQ, high cutting the sides, or any kind of processing, reverb processing. I'm sure you can think of stuff. You can also, of course, compress these. Put any VSTs in here and you've got a mid-side matrix. Now the next ones is the multi-band effects. There are two kinds of multi-band effects that are very similar. They look a bit different, but they basically do the same. First of all, multi-band FX2. It's just a split into low and high. You can set the crossover frequency here. Turn up or down, lows or highs. And then you've also got the multi-band FX3, where it's lows, highs, and mids. So you can solo these. You've also got a mute button. And it's got a little spectrum analyzer here where you can move around the bands and also change their volumes a bit here. One interesting thing about this to note is that this mix knob is not a mix knob after the split. I'm gonna try to show you why that is important, because as you can imagine, this kind of acts as an all-pass filter. If you split these bands, add them back together, there's going to be a phase shift. I'm gonna get an EQ curve analyzer here. Set this as the generator, this as the receiver, get a phase, suggest a latency. As you can see, the phase is flipped here. Now, if I turn the mix all the way down, this phase still stays flipped because this mixes basically lows and highs separately. So these have their own little mix knobs that's getting mixed. I can demonstrate this by putting this into a chain and using the chain's mix knob instead. Because now what you're going to see is that, first of all, the phase cancellation gets less. And second of all, because the phase is flipped here, we get a dip in the frequency spectrum. And to avoid this kind of green notch filter here that I can just demo for you with some white noise in a second, this mix knob acts as a per band mix knob. The same is true for the multiband FX3. So if I play you some white noise through this, you don't hear a dip in the frequencies. While if I put this into an FX layer and mix this to 50%, you can hear this kind of dip. Now if I just remove this FX layer again, the frequency response still stays flat. So yeah, that's kind of important for this mix knob. One interesting thing, of course, you can do with this multiband FX3 is you can get like dynamics and can make something that at least gets somewhat similar to Ableton's OTT by just squashing both of these. Getting like this kind of ratio, fast attack, fast release, putting this into every band. And you've got an OTT kind of effect. Then multiband split. The next thing, now we're going into a spectral terrain. So transient split. Like all spectral processors, this is linear phase, so you can just mix this dry wet and you're not gonna have any phase cancellation. This one splits the signals into a tonal part and a transient part. In the inspector you can see different modes, so if I just listen to the transient in percussive mode, this is kind of like the attacks of drums or something. While if I switch this to noise mode, maybe you can hear this better with a drum break or something. It's going to focus more on just identifying the parts of the signal that aren't pitched. So these are kind of the snappy parts. Well, these are more the noisy parts, and the tones part is like everything pitched in the signal. While in percussive modes, it's more about everything sustained in the signal. So you will hear some more noise here. Well, this is a lot more kind of spectrally tonal sounding. Now what else is important about this? You've got a tilt here that tilts the frequencies. You've got a decay for the transients and the smoothing for the tonal part. You can also switch this to spectrogram mode here and kind of see what exactly it's analyzing here. Something else that's interesting about this is that if I get some noise here, I'm sorry that I just demo everything with test tones, but it just makes stuff easier to see. And then I get a spectrum here, set this to wide, are these two tilt modes. So one tilt mode basically just biases the highs or the lows towards transients or tones. If I just turn on this noise, you can see I'm just listening to the transients right now. If I tilt this, this is just a tonal part. It biases it like this. If I select contour mode instead, it becomes more of a mix control for if it just gets lows and highs, or if it mostly focuses on the mids. So these two can be very useful if you're not quite happy with how it's splitting your signal. Then you've got different volume knobs for each signal. These are mute knobs, these loudspeaker buttons. You've got solo knobs, you've got a pan. That's the transient split. It's linear phase. So you can just mix this. This does change your signal a tiny bit. So this is not going to, if I get like an FX layer and I put this in here and do the infamous null test, flip the phase on this, it's not going to be exactly the same. You can hear there's still a bit going on, but it's not a lot. So this is quite a transparent effect. If I just don't put anything in here, of course. Oh, I had the panning on. I, of course, wouldn't want that. You can hear there's a subtle change, but if I just turn this on and off, you're not really gonna hear a difference. Other two important controls are the left and right slider here. This is a bias, whether a signal is more likely to get sorted into transients or tones. Get a lot more transients if it turned all the way up, and a lot less tones. And you've got this mix control, which is a bit confusingly placed, but basically if you turn this off, if you turn this all the way up, you just get transients. If you turn this all the way down, you just get tones. So this can be very useful for drum mixing. And you can also use this noise mode to, for example, maybe I can find some kind of tonal sample that I can... Yeah, let's try this because it's very noisy. You can kind of denoise a tonal sound. So if you just solo the tones... This is maybe a bad example. Maybe I have like a cello sample of something. No, what else could I use? Maybe get like a guitar. No, that's ugly. I'm gonna get one of those Jim Kimchi boat metals. So you're gonna hear this has noise bits, but it also has these kinds of harmonics. And if you just listen to the tonal part, it's kind of only the pitch stuff, while the transients are kind of the noisy bits of the signal. You can use this tilt and this control mode to adjust this further. So this can be used to denoise tonal sounds a bit if you want them to become more resonant and more clear. Now, I think that's everything I've got to say about this. So I'm gonna go back to my weird little noises here and move on to the frequency split. This one I find a bit confusing. It basically splits the signal into different bands. You can select how many. So if I just select 4, we've got lows, low mids, high mids, and highs. And then you can kind of affect how these different bands are exactly distributed. You can pan them, you can mix them. You can kind of blur the boundaries between the bands, and you can turn up the bands, which is going to split it into more bands, but these repeat. So everything red is still going in here. Everything blue in here, yellow in here, purple in here. You can limit these bands. So basically what this can do is it's kind of like a multi-band split, but with a lot of bands. You can then process these differently or get like... create weird phaser effects with this. In the inspector, you've just got one control, which is pre or post, which just affects what exactly the spectrum analyzer is showing. If I set this to post, you can see the limiter taking effect, while if I set this to pre, you can already see this. So this just affects what it shows here. Then the next one, the loud split. Now for this, I've got a little demo for you. So this basically splits, looks at this spectrogram here. and sees which frequencies go above a certain threshold and which don't. So if I just listen to the loud, you can also kind of use this for denoising. You've got the standard mix controls here. You can tilt this, so highs or lows are perceived as louder. You can rise and fall, which basically is the envelope follower, how quickly it reacts. Similarly to like a gate or something, this is like a loudness gate. So if I get like a test tone and get like a sine wave and turn up the gain, you can see it goes into the loud part of the signal, while if I only turn it up a little, or move these thresholds around, it goes into the mid. Or I can also move it into the quiet part, but of course we're not really going to be able to see this here. So if I solo the mids, it's here. If I solo the loud bit, it's not here. If I turn it up, it appears in the loud bit. And you can layer these, so you can get like a test tone at one frequency and then create a different test tone at a different frequency. The mid part, you will only hear this test tone here. So yeah, this can be quite useful or for denoising a signal, for removing quiet parts, for maybe bringing up the quiet parts. It's a nice little tool. The next one is Harmonic Split. Now, this is a bit more complex again. This basically is a frequency tracker. So it analyzes the signal and it tries to find a fundamental, and then it lets you process everything single harmonic of this differently. So if you select which harmonic mode it has here, you can just hear the fundamental here. So it seems to analyze this as a fundamental. If I get like a metal bolt plate, this is just a sine, and then you can hear all the harmonics. Or you can set it to, for example, hear all the odd harmonics here. Sounds like a square wave, because of course odd harmonics. Even harmonics. And this is just the noise part that it doesn't recognize as overtones of this fundamental it analyzed. You can set this region here. This region is really important for the analysis because it basically gives the device a hint where the fundamental is probably going to be found. So if you know this for your instrument, set this accordingly. A threshold is automatic by default, or you can also just turn it up to filter out any quieter parts being heard as the fundamental. And then you've got all these different ways of processing these, or you can also just use this to, for example, remove the noise, and you will basically just hear the parts of the sound that are kind of harmonically related. Fundamental. Now, if you don't set this range quick elegantly, you're gonna hear it's gonna start jumping around because it's struggling to find the pitch. You can set the maximum harmonics it analyzes here. Anything above that, higher harmonics, are just going to go into the noise part. So yeah, that's the harmonic split, and I think that was it with the spectral suite. Then a couple other things I want to talk about. The delay. Now, this only sort of fits in here, but it's an interesting delay. It's quite different to most delays you will hear. So I can get like a snare, because you can place FX in the feedback loop. So these FX get applied again every time it circles through the delay. If we just listen to the normal delay, you can hear it repeats. But if we put like a pitch shifter in here, it will get pitched up an octave every time. So if you listen to this, you get this series of higher and higher repeats of the signal. So you can create like these kinds of maybe shimmer delays with this. This of course has a lot of other properties that I'm not gonna go into much because this isn't a video about delay, it's about FX containers. But basically this just allows you to place effects into a feedback loop that then get applied again and again and again. If we get like a delay 4 here, you can see the same thing. You can place one into each feedback chain and then send different feedback chains to different chains, and you've got this kind of delay network. I'm not going to go into depth explaining what this does, partially because I don't use it that much by myself, but be aware of these feedback effects. They're an interesting kind of FX container, and they let you do something that you're usually not really able to do with default features of a DAW. Then one last thing I want to talk about is plugins, because some plugins, I think only clap plugins, but I'm not sure, some FX plugins specifically allow for multi-outs. So I've got this ST1B here, and this has multiple outputs here if you click these arrows. So this plugin can split my signal for me. This is a transient shaper, so this can split the transient and the non-transient part. So you've got another kind of transient splitter just by using these out chains here. So it might be useful if you've got a plugin that splits your signal to look if maybe it has an option to add missing chains here, because it offers multiple out FX chains. Now, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about, I think. Of course, you can combine all these. You can multi-band split, then mid-side split, then split the transients all inside each other, and so on and so on. There are many uses for these. They basically allow you to take control over different parts of your signal, even though you've only got a single audio file. So yeah, these are very nice. I think that's it. If you stuck around till the end, thanks for watching. See you soon-ish, maybe, probably. See you.